Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the world famous Sail Power Steam Museum, another one of these Zoom broadcasts. All you Zoomers out there, we're so happy to have you. This is our sign out on Snow Avenue. It goes down to the museum. Seven seems to be the magic number. I was 75 years old when we bought 75 Mechanic Street down here in 2017. And we built this, my wife and I built this museum, incredible museum. We're a five-star museum now. And we certainly welcome you to come down and see what it's all about. Tonight we have our captain's quarters number 36. 36 of these captain's quarters have gone on. It's amazing. All of these captains down here, look at this motley group down below there. That's all these captains, of course, were windjammer captains of the main windjammer fleet. And there are quite a few of them going over the bar now, but those that are left, I'm one of them right there. And let's see, I see John Foss over in the far corner. I believe he's in the audience there. Wave to us, John, if you're in the audience down there. Anyway, wanted to say hi. We have, as I say, 36 of these wonderful Captain's Quarters presentations. And tonight, my gosh, we've got a great one doing tonight. Slocum's Wake. Look at that beautiful little cutter there. Beautiful little cutter on a grand day with a very light breeze. This is the kind of breeze you put your feet up on the rail and just sit back and let nature take its course, headed for a horizon without a single blemish. A horizon away out, and that look at that little fine stern on her. She's almost a double ender. She's certainly sea kindly in a running breeze, I would say. But what a gorgeous little thing. We've got uh, Nat Warren White with us tonight. He's going to tell us all about that little vessel and sailing around the world. How many of you have wanted to sail around the world, as was done by Joshua Slocum? Who's Joshua Slocum? Joshua Slocum, this old guy here. He's in his later years. He's up in his 50s, but that's not surprising because you'll find out tonight our master of ceremonies might be in that same realm. He had this old funny looking boat called the Spray. It was a fish boat stuck on the beach there in Fairhaven and had been there for, oh, I don't know how many years. It was all falling apart. He completely rebuilt it and was the first man to sail alone all the way around the world, down through the Straits of Magellan, all the way across the Pacific, down through the Indonesia and over to Africa and back to the United States again. First man to do it all by himself. And Nat, who's your host tonight, Nat is going to tell you about how he got this bug, and he wanted to follow in Slocum's footsteps and do that same kind of thing. But before I let uh, Nat take over the watch here, I got to tell you something about the world famous Sail Power Steam Museum. The commercial. Oh, commercial. What a great thing the commercial was. I'll try not to bore you too hard. No snoring now until we get get this done. Right up there in the upper left is our main building, the old museum building. We're right solid full there, full of wonderful memorabilia in that museum now. We've got Nathaniel Bowditch's original backstaff and engraved to he and his family. A real treasure. We have a wonderful Bowden collection, schooner Bowden that went to the Arctic. We have Arctic memorabilia. We've got steam engines. We've got donkey engines. We've got all kinds of wonderful things in that museum. Over on the right-hand side, just beyond the museum, you see the Outward Bound boat from Outward Bound. They've had this building at one time in the past. And go on the way over to the right, we wanted to create a little bit more ambiance in the parking lot. So we decided we'd put a schooner out there. We have a two-masted schooner that we pulled out of the water, dug a hole, and stuck her in there. Now, you can, if you like, go aboard that vessel and see what it's like to stand on the deck of a pretty good sized schooner. She's about 70 feet on deck there. And you can go by the wheel and have your picture taken, and I guarantee you, you won't get seasick. She will not rock. Down below it is our new building. We, of course, were squeezed for space. So we, a couple of years ago, built this new building, wonderful, big new building. We've got a 30-foot steam launch in there, big stern paddle wheel on the thing, a guaranteed steam engine. We've got a number of other great engines in there. We've got called the Light Horseman, a rowing boat that first discovered Penobscot Bay in 1605. We've got a lot of other little sailing vessels there. What do we dwell on in the Sail Power and Sea Museum? We dwell a lot on the old snow shipyard. The shipyard over here in the lower left built vessels like this big four-master over here. Look at all the frames in that is standing up in a whole forest of wood went into those frames, and they're getting ready to plank her up. There'd be another forest that would provide the planking for that vessel of that size. They built these vessels one after another over and over again. For 140 years, the Snow family had that one shipyard right there, and they built over 65 vessels. My God, one every 2 years was launched right there from, well, it was really an amazing thing. One of the things that I really like about the museum is our skiff program. SKFF Sail Kids for Free. It gives me goosebumps all over. I see these little kids up in the upper left there. You see the little kid. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know a rudder from a centerboard and how to rig a sail. And there they are. Look at the little tiny guys, and they're rigging the sails on these Optimus prams, international class Optimus prams. We give them a week-long sail training session for every morning for a solid week at no cost. We take everybody and teach them how to go sailing. If you teach your kid how to go sailing, they won't have any time to mess with drugs. And get their telephone away from them. Get their telephone and put it in a drawer. Look at this guy down in the lower right there. He's got a smile on his face, such a big smile. He's about to swallow his whole head. He and his buddy in the other boat on the other side there, they're racing each other. That's the idea of the whole thing. As soon as you get in a boat and you look at your friend in the other boat, you say to yourself, I got to go faster than he does. And that's what creates the competition and starts this whole thing rolling. By Friday, not only are they sailors, they are professional sailors and racing out around the buoys, out around the outer harbor of Rockland. A whole week of sailing, they graduate. Last year, we graduated 145 kids. The year before that, 150 kids. The year before that, 150 kids. And it's all supported by you and your donations. And we can't thank you enough for being a part of our skiff program. If you have any extra change, drop it in a bucket and bring it down to the Sail Power and Sea Museum. We'll take care of it for you. We also do adult sail training. Ever sail a classic vessel? Right there in the center left, it's a Friendship sloop. A beautiful vessel. Friendship sloops. They're classic. They were Maine's first lobster boat. And we have two of them, the oldest Friendship sloop in the world, right there at the Sail Power and Sea Museum. She's 125 years old this year, and an incredible vessel. And on the other side, right there next to it, is the Herreshoff 12 and a half, another classic vessel, very much a classic vessel. Way over on the right hand, that's Persistence. That's the other Friendship sloop we have. Doing a little sailing class out among the trees and the cliffs there along the coast of Maine. What a beautiful thing it is to sail that kind of a vessel. Over in the upper left, you see our Sunday jam. Every Sunday we have music jam, free and open jam. Everybody comes, they bring their instruments, and whether they're good musicians or not really doesn't matter as long as you can clap and stamp your feet. But everybody gets a chance to sing the songs they love the most and sing the old classics, and everybody joins in with them. Down below it, on the left side, is Granddaddy taking his grandson out and giving him a sailing lesson in one of our catboats. That happens to be the Dynamite Payson catboat. Over on the other side, the little Opties going around the buoy out there, and all crowding around the buoy all at the same time. Down below, we have that great big tent set up on the beach down there. And you can see a little bit further to the left there in the middle, we're having a lobster bake there, great big lobster bake. You can have all kinds of things. Rent our tent, and you can do weddings and anniversaries and lunches and all kinds of great festive thingamajigs if you want to. Just give us a buzz and we'll set you up for it. Right above it is the Morning in Maine. She does 2 hour sails around the harbor, and great thing to see Rockland Harbor and see a little bit of Penobscot Bay. Well, I want to thank you for coming. We couldn't do all of this without you. We encourage donations, and we very gratefully we receive any donations, and anything that you can do to help us out. Why, it's just wonderful. So give a call. Come and see us now. Let's call Nat Warren White out here, and it's going to be his watch now. Here's this beautiful little boat that they went around the world in, and who I'm looking forward to. Such an exciting time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Nat, it's your watch.
Jim, thank you so much. It's a great introduction, and I can't believe I've never actually been to visit the museum. So now I got to
Shame,
get up there.
shame on you.
I don't know how I missed it, but it looks incredible, and it reminds me of this. The kids in the Opties remind me of where I grew up sailing.
Well, come, we'll give you a 30-cent tour.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, I'm going to try to bring some stuff up here on the screen. All right, great. We're off and sailing. So the good ship Bahati. I first read, Jim was telling us about Joshua Slocum. I first read his book when I was probably 10 years old, and I got the bug. I kept thinking, I want to do what he did. And I've reread the book many times, but it took me until I was 56 to actually be able to get out there. I thought I was going to do it in my 20s, but I couldn't come up with the money at the time. I had a boat that I could have jumped on, but didn't happen. So when I was in my 50s, I thought maybe now's the time, but then I had to talk my wife, Betsy, into supporting me in the process. And she spent a lot of time convincing me why I shouldn't do it. And then finally gave up and said, all right, well, if it's going to happen, I'll do what I can to make it happen with you. But here's the deal. I'll come along until I'm tired of it. Then I get to fly home and you can sail on. And when I want to jump back on board, I'll come join you. And that worked, actually. She came and went a number of times, and she sailed much farther than she thought she was going to sail. Our route began in Maine. As you can see here on this map, we sailed down the East Coast as far as Norfolk. We wanted, the boat had been refit in Portland at Portland Yacht Services, and we needed some time to break her in, to shake her down. So we sailed down the East Coast, popped in and out until we got to Norfolk, and then we took off, and we were headed for the Caribbean, but we ran into some bad weather. And actually, probably the worst weather we hit around the entire, almost the worst we hit around the entire world, was in that first stretch between Maine and Norfolk, between Norfolk and Bermuda. We were headed for St. Martin, and we got about halfway across, and we were in such bad shape. We were getting beat up so bad that we bore off and headed for Bermuda. Had a crew of 6 on board at that point, and we landed Bermuda and spent Thanksgiving, our first Thanksgiving in Bermuda. The entire crew jumped ship. They'd had enough, and we had to look for more crew. I picked up a couple of local folks, and we went from there down to St. Martin and on down to Grenada, turned right and headed through the Panama Canal. And then the rest of the way around, western, what they call the coconut milk run. So it was westerly all the way, a couple of runs north and south, but most of it was riding the trade winds all the way across. And I'm going to jump from place to place, show you some of the special spots along the way, because we don't really have time to show you everything. But the first place I want to take you, well, here, I'm going to show you a couple of other pictures. Here's Josh Slocum, my mentor, the guy who inspired me. And here's his boat, the Spray, which, as Jim said, was an old oyster catcher from Chesapeake Bay, which he rebuilt and took off. And he was the first guy to do it. It was an amazing undertaking. And here's Bahati, the boat that they're close to the same size. Bahati was built in South Africa in 1988. She's a Montevideo. There were about, I don't know, 50 or 60 of them built at that point. And we found her in Annapolis. We were her third owner. The first owners actually were South Africans who sailed around going the opposite direction and found their way to the States. And then some Canadians bought her and sailed around the Caribbean for about 5 years. And then we found her, and she turned out to be the perfect boat. She was just the boat we wanted. Center cockpit, cutter rig, sailed beautifully off the wind and on the wind, and we couldn't have been a better boat for us. We had a refit, as I said, in Portland, and this is a picture of my dad, who is one of our biggest cheerleaders. He's looking at a silver dollar that my grandfather, his father, gave me 1850 silver dollar that we placed under the mast for good luck, and it served us well. That silver dollar is still there under the mast, and the boat, you can go look at her. She's in Knight's boatyard in Rockland at this point, waiting for some repairs. The boat's been sold twice since we owned her, but that silver dollar, I suspect, is still there. My dad unfortunately passed away while we were sailing, and it was tough not to see him when we got home, but he was cheering us all the way. And he said to me, "I'm so glad you're doing this, because I would never do it, but I'm getting such pleasure out of watching you do it." His grandfather was the master of the Ada L. White, which was a bark that was built in Yarmouth, Maine, and he sailed her out of Portland. He did the triangular trade over to Scotland, down to the Caribbean, and back to Portland again for many years. And then Ada L. White went down off Cape Hatteras in the Bermuda Triangle. And the interesting irony is that when we were in that really bad weather off in the same area off Cape Hatteras, when we landed Bermuda, my father spoke to me on the phone, and he said, "I was so nervous because you were within 25 miles of where your great-grandfather's vessel went down." And we were fortunate that we got out of it. He didn't. His boat was carrying a load of tea at that point, and they started to take on water, and the whole boat swelled up and the decks blew off, and she went down. Everybody on board survived. Fortunately, they were rescued, but he never went back to sea. He became a shoemaker in Portland. But I think the blood that he left me is what got me going. I grew up in South Freeport. This is where I learned to sail, at the Harrisegate Yacht Club. You can almost see it down there on the bottom right. John Foss, I know, is on here tonight. He and I grew up sailing together. We were next door neighbors growing up in South Freeport. It was a wonderful place to spend a childhood, and we got great sail training there. Very similar. We were sailing turnabouts, not opties, but very similar to what's going on in Rockland at the museum at this point. We left South Freeport on October 21st, 2006. And this picture was taken by my sister from Cape Elizabeth as we headed south. We were riding the tail end of a nor'easter that had come through, and when the wind came around to the northwest, it blew us hard all the way down the coast. It was cold, but we were so happy to get going, and couldn't wait to get down to the Gulf Stream and get across. This is a picture of Betsy after we crossed the Gulf Stream. She said, "Oh, now I know why we were doing this." The water got warmer, it got bluer, and the winds settled down eventually, and we found our way to Bermuda, and she was very happy. So as I mentioned, we turned right at Grenada and headed for Panama. And this is just before we hit Grenada. This is our son, Josh, who joined us for the first year and a half of this trip, jumping off the spreaders. In case some of you know the Pitons in St. Lucia, that's where that picture was taken. Josh loved jumping off things. He jumped off many things as we went around, but he survived them all and sailed with us as far as New Zealand. The first place I want to take you to is the San Blas Islands, which are just off the east coast of Panama. And they're an amazing bunch of the 500 islands or so in that territory. And they're all one nation now. They're separated from Panama, went through a difficult time, but created their own country. And the sad thing is that now many of them are having to be evacuated because of rising seas and climate change. I think I read recently that 500 to 1,000 people who've lived on the San Blas have now been evacuated and can't live there anymore. But we were lucky. We were there when they were all still above water. We met some wonderful local people. Some of you probably know about molas. These are these beautiful hand-stitched pieces of fabric that they make, and we traded with them. Carried a number of them home with us. We have some hanging on our walls in the house today. They're just gorgeous. you can see some on this mother's beautiful costume dress that she's wearing. That's Betsy with her child. We were invited ashore. We spent many days with these people. They fed us well. They took care of us. And we traded with them gasoline for molas, for some food items. You know, we just had amazing month with these people. The kids had not a lot of toys to play with, but when they found floating styrofoam, they had a great time with it. And they all had pets. As we found going around the world, there were so many children, so many smiling children everywhere welcoming us, and so many pets of so many types. From the San Blas, we headed for the Panama Canal. This is a shot of Josh catching a manta ray. He actually got the hook as he was trying to get the manta ray off the hook. He got the hook caught in his hand. So that was not the fun part of the fishing, but we got a lot of fishing done along this trip, and many beautiful fish were picked up, mostly in the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. The Atlantic didn't have that many fish in it, surprisingly. We entered the canal, and if anybody's been through the canal, you know it's quite an experience, because you go in there with a big ship, and we were behind a freighter. There were 3 boats tied up to each other. We went through in a trio, and it took us 2 days to get through. You go up in the locks, 3 locks for the first day, then you spend the night in the Gatun Lakes, and with a pilot. One pilot gets off, another pilot gets on, and the next day you go down locks and you come out the other side. So you go from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean in 2 days. Here we are exiting in the Miraflores lock. This is the final lock before we head into the Pacific Ocean. That's Josh on the bow of the boat. The last lock is opening. There's actually a camera, a video camera in that lock office up there. And my mother and father were watching us go through as we came out that final lock, and we were able to wave at them and speak to them as we went through and came out the other side. After leaving Panama, we went out to the Las Perlas Islands and then headed across toward the Galapagos. We actually went 4 days out, and then we were melting our batteries down and had a lot of electrical problems. Plus, we had a very chronically seasick crew at that point, who was engineer helping us solve the electrical problems, but was very sick, and we didn't get things solved properly. So we made the difficult decision to turn back, and we went all the way back 4 days through the convergence zone, which is the hardest part of getting through the equator area. You know, fluky winds, bad weather, but we went back through it, went back to Panama, spent about a month sorting things out, recrewed, and took off again. And this picture was taken just before we landed in the Galapagos. That wahoo, beautiful fish, which we cut up into steaks, but it was too much for us to eat. So when we landed in the Galapagos, we took them ashore with us and found a small bar, canteen, and we asked them if they'd hold our fish for us till we left. And they said, sure. They put them in the freezer, and we could pick them up when we left. Oddly, the week we were there, this was in Santa Cruz, on the island of Santa Cruz, we kept seeing wahoo on the menu at the restaurant, but it didn't occur to us until we left that was actually our wahoo that we were paying for. We ended up getting it replaced by a bunch of beer and a bunch of other goods, and kept going. We couldn't stay in the Galapagos for more than a couple of weeks because of not having permits to do that. We begged a couple of extra days because we had one crew member with dengue fever and another with Montezuma's revenge, bad stomach dealings. And so we managed to get a couple of extra days, and got to see a lot of amazing animal life and beautiful bird life on the Galapagos. This is a Galapagos hawk, and we were actually this close to it. And these pictures, well, they remind me of what an incredible place. All the animals are so tame. The seals will swim up and put their faces up against your masks. Uh, they will climb up into your dinghies. The marine iguanas are constantly stacking up all around near you. Here's one of the famous Galapagos tortoises that I had a great conversation with. We found a number of them, and birds would come and just sit on the boat, sit on us when we were lying on the beach. It was an amazing place to spend time. Here are some of those marine iguanas stacking up along the shoreline, and they swim all over the harbor and climb up on your boats and anywhere they can find a place to perch. We went from the Galapagos across the Pacific, which took us 21 days, about 3,000 miles. And our first stop in crossing the Pacific was in the Marquesas. We landed in Fatuhiva. Robert Louis Stevenson, Gauguin, and a bunch of other famous artists and writers called this the most beautiful harbor in the world. It's extraordinary. Beautiful spot to start our Pacific exploration. When we landed here, we were headed ashore, and the kids, we had several crew members on board at that point, young people, all 20-somethings, and they jumped off the boat immediately as soon as we dropped the hook and started to swim ashore. I was below, and I heard some shouting, and I went up on deck, and they said, Dad, quick, come get us. They were stuck up on a rock. They'd climbed up on a rock about halfway to the shore, and they said, there's a shark following us. And I said, what? There was yes, there's a shark, and he's come up 3 times. And sure enough, there's a hammerhead shark had been swimming around the cove. And we went ashore and we said, there's a hammerhead out there following people. They said, don't worry about it. That's our pet George. He's here. He's tame. You have nothing to fear. We got ashore, had a wonderful few weeks there. We never left Fatuhiva. We actually never cleared into the Marquesas. We were supposed to go up to Nukahiva to clear in, but we were having such a good time. Fatuhiva, we just stayed there and managed to pick up some fuel off the local ferry boat, some cleanest diesel fuel I've ever seen, and then headed off to the Tuamotus, which are the next stop between the Marquesas and Tahiti. In the Tuamotus, we stopped in an island, Kauai, which is the Tuamotus are very different from the Marquesas. The Marquesas are very mountainous. The Tuamotus are atolls. They're absolutely flat, old volcanoes with big open bays in them. You sneak in through a cut, and then you have incredible inside sailing. This bay was about 10 kilometers across. We ended up spending about a week there. This was a local pearl farmer. He had been a policeman in Tahiti, but ended up retiring to raise pearls, beautiful black pearls. And we traded with him for diving masks and foul weather gear and cans of beans, and brought home a lot of beautiful, imperfect, but gorgeous black pearls. This young fellow was a Norwegian friend of ours, a 5-year-old Peter, on a Norwegian boat that was sailing with us at that point. And he was very proud because he traded black pearls for M&Ms with a local boy, actually the grandson of that pearl farmer you saw. Both of them were very pleased with what they walked away with. From the Marquesas, from the Tuamotus, we headed over to Tahiti and Bora Bora, the French Polynesian islands. We had a couple of boys surfing on board. Josh, my son, our son was a great surfer, and we had another crew on board at that point that were looking for the perfect wave. This is Bora Bora. I did not take this picture, but just gives you a sense of what these islands look like. They are extraordinarily beautiful. And we spent several weeks poking around in the French Polynesian islands and diving. The waters are incredibly clear. This actually picture was taken just off the airport in Tahiti, off the Papeete airport. And there's a plane that had not quite found its way to where it was supposed to go. And you could dive down. It's only in about 25 feet of water. And we dove down and sat in the cockpit. It's an incredibly beautiful, clear waters. Swimming with the rays, and with black-tip sharks. Totally harmless, as we found, but happy to see us. From there, we sailed to the Cook Islands, headed toward Tonga, and we spent several weeks poking around in the Cook Islands. Our favorite was Aitutaki. We attempted to get into the harbor there, but we called the tide wrong. Unfortunately, we got stuck halfway through the pass and had a hell of a time getting out. We finally got a local fishing boat to tow us out. We anchored outside and stayed out there for over a week, and it was extraordinary. We were anchored right on the reef, and the humpback whales would come in and swim under the boat, just missing the boat. The baby whales would surround us at night. And in the nighttime, the local fishermen would come out screaming around in their outboard boats with nets, like butterfly nets, catching flying fish to eat. It was extraordinary. It was like watching a Chagall painting with them catching those fish. It was just, we loved this part of the world. From there, we went to Tonga. We picked up, Betsy came and joined us again in Tonga. She'd flown home from Panama, sailed across the Pacific with just my son and his friend Mikey. We landed in Tonga. Betsy came back to join us with another crew member, a young woman from Vermont, friend of ours. This was an Omo, a Tongan clam bake that Josh created to celebrate Hillary's 21st birthday, which she had on the beach. She was our new crew member, and we celebrated her 21st on the beach in Tonga. Tongan Islands are extraordinary to poke around. There are hundreds of them, and they're very good cruising country. I'd highly recommend it. From Tonga, we headed to New Zealand, and this is one of the other bad or difficult stretches because it's about 1,200 miles sailing down from New Zealand through the convergence zone back across the equator. And you're always going to run into some bad weather on this trip. You just have to pick your moment and hope you don't get hit too badly. We had a low that was following us most of the way down. And fortunately, we had a weather router in Auckland who was helping us along the way. We were in touch with him every day. And we'd call him up on the single sideband radio and get a weather report. And he kept saying, "Go west, go west, go west." And we were closer to New Caledonia by the time we ended up in New Zealand than we were to Opua, to the North Island. But we managed to just barely escape that storm. One moment, the wind just stopped completely and the water around us, it was blowing probably 40, 45 knots. Suddenly the wind just stopped. The water turned to boiling lava. It just looked like a lava field. And we realized we were right in the eye of the storm. Within half an hour, the wind completely went 180 degrees, started blowing hard from astern, and we sailed off the wind the rest of the way down to Opua in the North Island of New Zealand. This is Josh on weather duty. He was our chief weatherman. We were talking to about 15 other boats who were converging with us on this passage, all exchanging information. And we had one boat that entertained us by making us come up with stories and songs and jokes every day to get us the rest of the way down. We arrived safely. All 15 boats arrived safely. You can see Hillary in her bunk on the left here. She was not feeling well at that point. And Mikey, Josh's good buddy Mikey, was bundled up here off the watch. We had a lot of seasickness on this passage, but we made it. And the crew did a terrific job getting us there. This is one moment, that's Mikey on watch, one moment that gives you a sense of what it felt like out there when it was blowing 45. I think we never saw over 50 knots during that time, but that was plenty for us. We were flying, we blew out a jib on this run. But fortunately, we had a big old deck scraper that we managed to put up in its place. And we ended up in Opua in time for our second Thanksgiving. There was a big party with all the people who'd sailed down from Tonga with us, and we called ourselves the Hindsight Crew. This was the party with all the hindsight glasses everybody created to dress up with at the Thanksgiving hindsight party. And we called ourselves the Hindsight Crew because in hindsight, we realized we probably timed our passage a little bit wrong. There were about 6 boats behind us that had a better time than we did. But we made it. We all made it safely, and we're happy to. We ended up spending a year and a half in New Zealand, not intentionally. But during the time after we'd landed in New Zealand, we got word from home that my mother was sick with cancer. We knew she'd been sick, but we didn't know how sick she was. And I got word from my sister that things were not going well. We did manage to get home and were able to say goodbye to her and came back to the boat. But as many of you know, I'm sure, there's only a couple of seasons when you can sail in and out of New Zealand. So when you're coming down in the fall, you got to wait till the following, you got to go through a whole winter season before you can leave the following spring because of weather patterns. And we missed the chance to leave that spring because we were home with my mother. And so we ended up spending a winter in their winter, our summer in New Zealand. It was terribly cold and unpleasant, but we got through it, and it gave me a chance to do some work on the way. I was able to fly out of New Zealand and do some consulting work in Singapore and Australia, and we were able to replenish the cruising kitty a bit, which was very helpful. After we said goodbye to my mom, we got back to the boat, and this was May 4th, my birthday in 2008. We left New Zealand. You can see how happy Betsy was to finally get offshore again, and we headed north. We headed north to Vanuatu. The group of islands, Tana was the first Vanuatu island that we hit. And we spent a couple of weeks there. It's extraordinary. The local people were wonderfully welcoming. And they took us up to their active volcano. Literally, you can walk this close to the edge of the crater and look down inside. The guide that took us up said, the main thing you got to watch out for is when you see rocks fly up in the air, don't run. Wait until they start down so you can see what direction they're flying, and then you'll know which direction to run. Fortunately, we didn't see any huge rocks flying up, but we had some good time up there and drank some kava, the local intoxicating juice that they make from the kava plant, and got some great tours up there. We just heard recently that they've had some bad storms there, and they actually had to evacuate much of the island of Tana. From Tana, we went up a little further in the island chain, and we witnessed what we'd heard about, but had only hoped to see, which is called land diving. Land diving is a ritual that happens every spring. And it's a ritual where the local people build these towers out of wood that go up 75, 100 feet in the air. And then they go up and they tie vines to their ankles. And the vines have to be exactly the right length, of course. And they're a little bit stretchy in the spring. And then they dive head first off these towers. And they land with their forehead touching the ground. It's extraordinary to watch. These vines are tied by the elders in the community, and they're tied to exactly the right length. We watched about 7 of these guys dive off these towers. None of them got hurt, fortunately, but we did hear that the Queen Elizabeth, had been there to visit a few years before and had wanted to see the land diving, and unfortunately it wasn't the right season, but they did it. And somebody died because the vines were not stretchy enough. We were very fortunate to see this and took a lot of pictures. In the process, when I landed there, that the morning we were walking up to the land diving site, this young woman came up. It was raining, and she came up with her umbrella and her baby, and she stood over my backpack and kept guard over my backpack while I was off taking pictures and enjoying the incredible rituals of the local folks. This was one of the land divers that we witnessed that day. He's wearing what's called a namba, a penis sheath, and that's it. There are big nambas and little nambas, and this is all they wore. I was surprised he was standing out in the rain with an umbrella when he, didn't have much to cover up. And I asked the girl who was watching my gear why he needed the umbrella. And he said, she said, he didn't want to mess up his hair. He had his hair perfectly done for the dive, and he didn't want it to get wet. So he kept the umbrella up until he got up on the tower, and then ditched it and made a perfect dive and landed with his hair intact. From Vanuatu, we sailed west, heading toward the Great Barrier Reef. Spent about a week getting some sail repairs done and some crew exchange in New Caledonia, and then landed in the Great Barrier Reef. This is we were screaming up the inside of the Great Barrier Reef. We landed in Cairns and then sailed north, and we had probably 25 to 35 knots all the way up the inside of that reef, and we sailed fast every day. We had one other boat, a boat from Alaska, from Unalaska, Alaska, was with us that entire way. And just the two of us. And we had quite a sail up in the night. We just drop our hook where the GPS said there was a reef. You couldn't see anything, but we found a shallow enough spot to drop the hook and let the winds blow through the rigging all night, and then safely depart the next day. This is one of those beautiful white sandy beaches that the Great Barrier Reef is blessed with, but you'll notice there's no one on it. Nobody swims on these beaches. Perhaps you can guess why. Because of the salty crocs. Every beach has its own resident salty croc, and they are very protective of their territory. There were fishermen we met along the way who went ashore with weapons. They always carried a rifle in case a salty croc would emerge. And they told us that they'd actually witnessed crocs attack tourists who made the mistake of trying to go swimming on these beaches. And so nobody swam on them. It was a shame, but the salty crocs are protected, and they love their territory. We saw one or two of them swimming in the bays that we stopped in along the way. And I remember one night getting in the dinghy and going over to our neighbor's boat. And as I was rowing across, Betsy said, "I see him, he's coming." And the croc was swimming after me in the dinghy. I was in an inflatable dinghy, mind you. So I rowed as fast as I could till I got to the other boat, and then jumped off and waited till he disappeared to come back home again. But they make you nervous, these animals, and they're huge. They're 15, 20 feet long. From the north of, we went around over the top of Australia into the Gulf of Carpentaria, and sailed past Darwin. We'd heard that there was difficult customs problems in Darwin, so we skipped it, and we headed straight for Indonesia. There was not much wind on this stretch. We had to power a lot of the way. And our first stop was in East Timor, right there. That first waypoint stop you can see there was in East Timor. And we went ashore there and cleared into Indonesia, got fueled up, and then found our way off and headed toward Bali. The Indonesian folks were wonderfully welcoming. This is one of the local Indonesian fishermen. They sail out in these boats they build themselves, and outriggers. One man to a boat, and hundreds of them go out every day and come back in the evening with their catch. From Indonesia, we sailed north to Thailand. we decided we'd take an extra year so that we could explore all of Indonesia and Thailand. We sailed north through Malaysia, up to Singapore, and then up to Thailand. And when we got to Malaysia, to Langkawi, which is the furthest northernmost island in Malaysia, we got word from home that my father was very sick and had come down with cancer as well. So we ended up spending several months in Langkawi and flew home again, and were able to get home in time to bid him farewell as well. He said, "Don't come home, don't come home, just keep going." But of course, we had to, and sadly, we lost him as well. And not having the two of them at home to welcome us when we got back to Maine was a sad happening. But they were our biggest cheerleaders, and they were thrilled that we were out there. This is at one of the beautiful sunsets in Thailand. When we hit Thailand, we were actually, it was Christmas Eve, and we were headed up to Phuket. And it's only about 150 miles from Langkawi to Phuket. It was Christmas Eve. We wanted to get there for Christmas morning because we had other friends who were on their boats up there, and we wanted to join them for the holidays. And we took off in the middle of the night to get there Christmas morning. Both of us had just returned to the boat. I'd been in Japan working. Betsy'd been at home finishing up things there, and we both flew back, and we left the next day. We should never have left. We were both too tired, and the result was probably the worst moment of our voyage. We had a T-bone collision with a huge Thai fishing vessel in the middle of the night. I was on watch, as I often had been by myself, but I had set an alarm, checked the horizon, checked the radar, set an alarm, put my head down. Betsy was sick with bronchitis in the aft cabin, and I didn't want to wake her up. I made the foolish mistake of putting my head down and expecting the alarm to wake me up. It did not. And what woke me up was this head-on collision with a 100-foot Thai fishing boat. Fortunately, no one was injured. Bahati was badly damaged, and we were able to get her hauled out in Phuket, and about $20,000. And 2 months later, she was repaired by this wonderful crew of Thai boat yard guys. There's Betsy on the left. These guys became our close friends. They did a beautiful job, cut the bow off, the damaged part of the bow off with a chainsaw, and then rebuilt the entire bow, stronger than it had been before. So we were lucky. We got out of this with no injuries to anybody, and we were able to keep on sailing. But it taught me a hard lesson, and I can tell you that I've never fallen asleep on watch since. We left Thailand, and this was a moment in Phuket when I was being whispered secrets by one of the locals. He was telling me, what to watch out for next as we headed south. We left Thailand and went back down through Indonesia to Bali again, and we met a lot of. This is one of the stops we made, one of the Indonesian islands where we stopped to pick up fuel. The local kids again, and the local people treated us like, the hospitality was amazing. And we had a hitchhiker. He jumped aboard, we think, in Singapore. We called him El Gecko. He stayed with us and would appear every so often to check our navigation. He'd climb up the rigging and check the rigging, and then he'd appear down below. Every so often, he'd just show up. But then he jumped ship in Bali, and we never saw him again. We were sad to see him go. He was a good companion. From Bali, we headed across the Indian Ocean, first to Christmas Island, then Cocos Keeling. Josh came back and joined me, and Betsy flew home from Bali, and I had one crew member, actually had 3 crew members from Bali to Christmas Island. Josh and his good friend Mikey came back with us, and then a young crew member who flew into Bali named Ben Powers, who was recommended to us by a previous crew member. Ben jumped on board and stayed with me the entire Indian Ocean passage. Josh and Mikey got off at Christmas Island to go surfing and head home. And then it was just Mikey and me for the rest of the Indian Ocean. This is Mikey. I was blessed to find this young sailor. He was incredibly capable, incredibly experienced. He's one of those people, when you have him on board, you know you can go to sleep at night and not worry, the boat will be fine. I was blessed to have Ben on board. Here we are, headed across the Indian Ocean, headed toward Cocos Keeling at this point, actually toward Christmas Island, which was our first stop. We landed on Christmas Island, which is basically a penal colony at this point for refugees coming in from all over Southeast Asia and in the eastern part of Asia. They land in these boats and they're brought ashore and put into a holding facility, basically a prison. It's not a pretty sight. We saw several of these boats come in and watched people get removed, and most of them get sent back home. The other thing we witnessed was this mass migration of crabs. These giant crabs that crawl down out of the mountains down to the ocean. Happens once a year. We happened to be there when they would on their trip from the mountains down to the sea. And here's one of them. They're supposed to be good to eat. We never tasted one, but they were fun to watch. Giant hermit crabs, basically. As we left Christmas Island, we were putting the gear away to get ready to sail toward Cocos Keeling, and I heard a shout from the back of the boat, and I turned around, and Ben had hooked himself, fortunately, on a brand new lure that we just bought. Couldn't pull it out because there were barbs on the end of it, so I had to get the giant wire snips out that we kept for emergencies to cut shrouds and heavy wire, and I managed to snip that hook off just above the skin on the upper side of the barb, and we were able to slide it out. Ben said, as soon as we got it out, just bandage it up. We're all right. We can leave. And I said, no, I think we should go ashore and get this checked. And we did. We went to the infirmary at the mining company there, and Ben was well taken care of by 3 young nurses who were sad that they hadn't been able to take the hook out themselves. They said, we wished you'd left it for us to deal with. But they bandaged him up, and we took off and headed for Cocos Keeling. This is the boat heading across the Indian Ocean toward Cocos Keeling at this point. Strong winds coming. We were being chased by a cyclone across that entire body of water. Took us 2 weeks to get across from Cocos Keeling to Mauritius, and the winds were cross current, cross winds, rough sailing all the way, and just 2 of us. We barely talked to each other because we'd pass as we crossed watches, but we did some good fishing as we went along, and we had some hitchhikers. This is one big booby that landed and sailed with us for a couple of days, sitting on the solar panels, and another hitchhiker on the aft end on the cockpit box. A lot of birds that flew in and took refuge, and then we caught some good fish. This was what's called a short-billed spearfish. We looked him up in the book after we'd caught him, and they said this is a very rare fish. Likely you'll ever catch one, about 60 pounds. And when we pulled him up alongside, I said, we gotta let this fish go, Ben. It's too big. We'll never eat it. He said, no. Bring him aboard. We'll eat him. So we did, and chopped him up into steaks and dried them and salted them, made chowder out of them. We had sushi first, of course. We ate more short-billed spearfish than you'll ever want to take in a week. And we were so sick and tired of fish after that week, we didn't put a hook in the water for for quite a few days. But Ben was very proud of this fish and said it would bring us good luck if we ate the whole thing. We did. We finally landed in Durban, South Africa, passing underneath Malaysia, and sailed into Durban. And as we approached the dock in Durban, we surfed around the man-made breakwater, narrowly missed a cargo ship headed out. And as we landed there, our lines were taken at the local yacht club by a gentleman who looked at our boat and he said, "I know this boat. Didn't it used to be called Whisper?" And sure enough, he'd seen this boat and sailed on Bahati as we knew her. He sailed on her when she was first launched in 1988, and this was her return home, 2010 to South Africa. She was glad to get home. He was happy to see her. We had one crew member on board, South African crew member, when we were in the Caribbean, and his hometown was in Knysna, which is probably the only really good harbor on that entire coast, the Wild Coast it's called, down from Durban, between Durban and Cape Town. Hard sailing, rough waters. When the Agulhas Current, which is moving south at about 9 knots, meets the southerly winds that come out of the Southern Ocean, which can blow very hard. They're called the Buster. When the two collide, you can get waves as high as 100 feet along this coast, and many ships have been lost. So you have to pick your moments to duck in and out. We stopped in Knysna. Betsy flew back in and sailed with us for a few days, and we sailed into Knysna and had Christmas with our crew, our South African crew, Gareth Weiss from Knysna, and had a wonderful visit with them. It's a beautiful harbor, Knysna, and the only really good harbor on that coast. In Cape Town, we climbed the mountains. We did everything you're supposed to do in Cape Town, and visited the cell that Nelson Mandela spent 20 years in, and just had a wonderful time, Christmas and New Year's. Betsy flew in with 2 new crew members to join me for the final Atlantic crossing. And we hauled the boat in Simonstown, which is on the east side of the Cape Agulhas, Cape of Good Hope. We hauled the boat for the 5th time, but the first time since we'd left Australia. And this is what we found on the bottom of the boat. This growth was like hard macaroni. You had to chop it off with an axe. It was incredibly tough to remove from the bottom of the boat. We did a complete bottom cleaning, removed the propeller, and cleaned everything up, cleaned the engine up, and got everything prepared for the final Atlantic crossing. And we finally found a good day when the wind wasn't blowing 50, 60, 70 knots. We finally escaped from Simonstown and found our way around the Cape of Good Hope. We managed to get around in about 30 knots of breeze, and it stayed down until we got far enough off the west coast that we were able to sail north safely towards St. Helena and back across the Atlantic. Our first stop on this final passage, it took us 52 days from Cape Town to the Caribbean. We made 2 stops. The first was in St. Helena. This is one of those moments in the South Atlantic. We didn't have a lot of wind coming back after we got up into the St. Helena and Ascension territory, but some good sailing. We flew the spinnaker a lot of the way up here. The big blue spinnaker was a joy to have up much of that way. And then there were times when there was no wind at all, and we had to power to get through the doldrums. This was our first stop at St. Helena, which many of you know is probably where the Napoleon, the French general was sent to end his life The sad ending of his life was on St. Helena. The people who live there call themselves saints, and they're just a wonderful, wonderful population of people far away from the rest of the world. One of my crew members on this passage was Sarah Haskell, an artist, and she went and visited. We all went and visited the local schools, and she made prayer flags with them, which they flew outside the school, and we had a wonderful visit there. We moved from St. Helena up to Ascension, which is like landing on the moon. There's not much there, but there was a landing strip for the spacecraft, for the international, for the space shuttle that was still flying at that point. That was really the only thing, except for a bunch of communications towers on Ascension. But we did manage to land there when the sea turtles were migrating from Brazil, and we watched them crawl up on the beach, lay their eggs, and then swim back into the ocean. And the eggs would hatch, and we were actually there when the baby turtles were crawling back into the ocean to recross and go back to Brazil again. Extraordinary to watch this. This was one with a dolphin fish behind him that we managed to capture a picture of. From our first landing back in the Caribbean was in Barbados. We landed there and we were accompanied by dolphins as we headed in finally to make our first landfall in the Caribbean. Our final equator crossing happened just before we obviously got back to the Caribbean. There was no wind on the equator, and we were in about 15,000 feet of water. And my crew at that point, Sarah, her brother Wes, and our other crew, Susan, received their initiation crossing the equator and had to deal with Neptune's welcome. They turned from into shellbacks, from polywogs to shellbacks, and suffered their way through. Had to whip each other with cordage. Neptune insisted that they get this kind of treatment, but they made it and safely across the equator. And we stopped on the equator with absolutely no wind. Crew wanted to go swimming. And I said, fine, but you're going to have to go in with a line, hold on to a line. And we just drifted for hours as we all swam around the boat, always holding on to that piece of line in case the boat should suddenly decide to take off. But it was extraordinary swimming in that deep, deep water. These are the trade wind clouds when we finally hit the trades at about 4 degrees north after getting across the equator and heading toward Barbados. We landed in Barbados, and they were in the middle of having what they called a fishing torment. The fishes were well tormented, and this was a total collection of fishing boats from all over the Caribbean, catching all kinds of game fish. And we wondered what happened to them all. And they told us they were given to local homes, and all the fish was eaten eventually, which we were relieved to hear. Mount Gay rum made on Barbados, and we learned to love it. This is Betsy. She came back to join us again in Barbados for the final stretch home, admiring the local vintage. We moved from Barbados across to Bequia, which was the moment in our voyage when we actually crossed our outgoing path. We completed our circle in Bequia, wonderful island where whaling is still accomplished out of these open whale boats. And this one was called Why Not? And we actually watched them as they brought in 2 whales while we were there. They're allowed to catch 3 whales a year out of these open sailing boats. We headed from Bequia north back up through the chain of islands, through the Windward Islands, and eventually managed to cross the Gulf Stream again as we headed back toward Maine. We stopped in Bermuda and picked up one of the crew who had sailed with us on the way down. he and his girlfriend joined us, and we headed back across the Gulf Stream, missing another front that came through, but caught our first bluefish getting close to home. And Betsy cooked it up, and we celebrated this moment of getting close back to Maine. Just before we hit Maine, we landed in Cape Ann, and the most wind we saw since leaving South Africa was off Cape Ann. We had 50-knot squalls. Some of you may remember this was the spring of 2011. There were tornadoes flying around Massachusetts and Boston that weekend, and we got caught in some of that wind. It blew like hell. We had to strip the boat down and heave to for a while, but quite a surprise after that entire crossing to find this much wind so close to home. But we found our way home and landed in the Goslings just off South Freeport at about 6 a.m. on the morning of June 17th, 2011. This is my buddy Pete, who joined us in Cape Ann and sailed with us the last leg home, blowing the conch as we sailed back into the Goslings. And we were greeted by the boat that we'd actually had our honeymoon in, a beautiful Hinckley Pilot owned by Jim Harvey, and called Madrigal. Some of you probably know this boat. She came out to greet us, and along with a couple of friends, and one of them, Julie O'Brien, I believe, is here tonight. She's standing there in the cockpit with Jim. They came out, blew off a cannon at 6 a.m. and welcomed us home. And we landed back in South Freeport safe and sound. As we landed, we had quite a crew on the dock to welcome us home. And we got ashore. And the first thing we saw when we walked back up to our house was this beautiful, well-known Maine animal welcoming us back to Maine. So the voyage ended. And we were almost 5 years, 4.5 years out there, grateful to be home and grateful that we'd managed to complete a trip that was a dream of a lifetime for me, and that Betsy agreed to help with. And I have to give her huge credit. She managed all the food storage along the way. She managed all the medical kits. She managed to bring in a bag full of replacement steering cables when she flew into Tonga. If she brought in charts, wherever she joined us, she brought supplies and help, crew and help with her. So I owe Betsy a huge thank you and a big debt of gratitude for helping us get around on this voyage, along with 50 other friends and family members who joined us in various locations. The 20-somethings, the young folks, Josh, our son, and his friends, and the other 20-somethings who jumped aboard along the way were such a godsend. They were fearless and able to get us through almost any fix that we found ourselves in. So that's the voyage, folks. I'll end there, and the book is available. It will tell the whole story. It's available at Sherman's bookstore, and I think it's available in Camden at the Owl and the Turtle, and in Brunswick at the Gulf of Maine bookstore. Don't buy it from Amazon, please. Buy it at your local bookstore if you're going to get it. So I will stop the share here, and perhaps there'll be some questions.
Thank you, Nat. Terrific, terrific, terrific dissertation. I can hear the thunderous applause out there, except that everybody's on mute, but I'm sure that there's a thundering applause out there. Would you share your age when you get back into Maine?
Yes, I was, so took us 5 years. I left when I was 56. So I was just past 60. We got back in just past 60. I'm back in 2011. So I'm hitting 75 this year. And I think you asked me the other day whether I'd do it again, Jim. And I said, yeah, if I could go back 20 years, sure. But I couldn't, my body couldn't take it now.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, that's all right. There's hope for the rest of us. My gosh, that's great to be 60 years old coming back from a trip like that. You and Slocum must have been pretty close to the same age when he disappeared.
I think so. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
how old he was actually, but he'd covered a lot of water.
yeah, yeah. And so did you. Well, my hat's off to you. We got anybody in the audience that wants to ask questions? Unmute, and this is probably a good time for it.
Please do. Yeah, I think I made it right on time, didn't I?
It's perfect.
Robin,
That was
it's hard,
perfect.
hard to get 5 years into an hour, but we did it.
Uh-huh. Well, I wonder if I could uh, quote you in your book just quickly here. I like this what you said. This one particular part of a paragraph, and what you wrote was the uh, demands of the bureaucracies, the human failings, the shoreborne illnesses, the high-speed connection, the high-speed communication make life on land typically much more fraught and challenging than any day at sea.
So true. Yeah, I've getting back after 5 years at sea is stressful. Just dealing with what you have to face when you get home is not easy. And I would love to be back out there. The way life is going these days on land, I think being at sea is probably the best place to be these days.
Yeah, I agree with you. As long as you don't have too much bureaucratic nonsense to when you enter and leave some of these little small places where the inspectors all wear great big hats.
That's true. Yeah. But there, we never ran into any place where they weren't happy to see us. We had to go through a lot of red tape and sometimes a little bit of the green stuff had to go out too. But everybody was very, very welcoming.
Yeah. Once you get through it and get to the real people, it's just a blessing. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Good. Any other comments there
Nat,
from the
we
audience?
we talked earlier, Nat, about picking things up when you're traveling like that in a small boat. Well, it's not a small boat, but it's small when you're out there for 5 years. You were showing pictures of trading with some of the island people. Did you bring stuff? Were you prepared to do that?
Oh yes, we brought
Yeah,
home a lot of beautiful wood carvings,
yeah.
and the molas that I showed you there. We have a bunch of those that we're still framing and finding ways to enjoy. Lots of I picked up a bunch of stuff that we were able to bring home. A lot of black pearls came home with us too. We weren't supposed to take those out of Tahiti, but we did, and some of those have made it. My mother had a beautiful pair of black pearl earrings that we gave her when we went home to see her to say goodbye.
Great, great.
Any
Yeah.
other questions? Anybody, please just jump off mute and anything. Did
Even
anybody write anything in the
No,
chat?
I have one just saying it's a great story. Thanks for sharing it tonight. How about, oh, maybe there's one new one. How about comments? I mean, that was fabulous. Thank you for sharing your adventures, stories, and for the spectacular pictures.
Yeah, I see my friend Paula out there. Hi, Paula.
Hi, are you still in touch with any of the people, especially children? I mean, these relationships when you're traveling become very deep but are hard to maintain.
Well,
My
we're
experience,
we're in touch with some of the crew that we had on board. So the young crew member from South Africa who now has a child, a 12-year-old daughter.
Well, we're old, Nat. We know this. Yeah,
Time flies,
I
but we're
know.
in touch with a lot of people who obviously who sailed with us. There are a few people because we spent so much time in New Zealand. There are a
Mhm.
bunch of people there that we're still in touch with, that we're very close to. But the island people we haven't.
Right.
The wonderful people we met on those in Vanuatu and the Cook Islands and those areas, we have not been back in touch with. I would love to go back to the Pacific and go back to visit those islands again. They're just so beautiful, and the people are so kind and welcoming. It's a part of the world that I think everybody ought to have a chance to go check out at some point.
Yeah, everyone says that now. Everyone says how beautiful it is. No one has sailed here, huh? None of the people from Australia or New Zealand have shown up in Maine?
No, but you remember that kid who traded pearls for M&Ms?
Yeah.
So his family arrived here in Maine, the Norwegian boat, and
Oh,
they interestingly enough, that was the captain's oldest son. He went home with his mother. And the captain's new partner who sailed with him most of the way, all the way around the world, gave birth to two children while they were sailing.
oh
Both
my
of them, they were both infants when they sailed across the Indian Ocean with those two kids. And they came to Maine and spent a bunch of time up here with us before they went back to Norway.
Wow. That's amazing to have kids on. Wow.
Oh, I mean, I
No.
couldn't believe that they would do that crossing with two kids under the age of 2 on board.
Wow.
Now, we do have a question, and I don't know where Debbie's from, but is saying this was spectacular. It was a vacation in less than 2 hours. Beautiful photography throughout. Is there ever a place and time where you might autograph a copy of your book? I think we should have some
Absolutely.
copies in
Yeah,
the
I mean,
museum.
the easiest way to do that is to just send me an email and I can sign the book and send it to you. You can just pay me for it through PayPal. It'll be cheaper that way than doing it through anybody else because I have a deal. But I can do it that way. Otherwise, you can always come find me in South Freeport or just send me a note if you're in Maine and we could hook up and I'd be happy to sign it for you.
You know a guy.
I know a guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a few of these books hanging around here. I can find one for you.
Any other
Yeah.
questions? Or comments? Okay, Jim, it looks like you're on.
There I is I
Thank
on
you,
there?
everybody.
Thank you so much, Nat.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful book it is. I think you better bring a few copies when you come up and see the museum.
Will do.
So, so terrific. Well, working our way ahead here. I hope we're working our way ahead. There we go. I want to just look astern a little bit, tell you about the programs we've done. All the way back in 2020, we started, and we've done 34 of these things now. All of these vessels, you can see all the different windjammers that in the Camden fleet, the Rockland fleet, the Penobscot Bay windjammers, all their captains have done different programs about their own vessels and so on and so forth. Captain John Foster, we believe is in the audience there somewhere, he was the captain on the American Eagle. And well, number 9, April 6th is when we did the program on the American Eagle. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, check out our website. And these are all listed on the website. Bringing it up to date a little bit more, this last year and this year, we've done quite a lot of different ones, particularly the schooner Bowdoin. That was a great one, getting north again for the 35th voyage above the Arctic Circle. And we had these others, the old snow shipyard of Rockland that I mentioned, where the museum is on the site of where the old snow shipyard was. And Battle of Ink and Ice we did last time. This time, wonderful. This author of Slocum's Weight with Nat is terrific presentation. One more April 8th we're going to try and do. That's part 2 of the old snow shipyard. And it's going to be a long program because there's an awful lot to it. A shipyard that is 140 years owned by one family. Boy, you got to have a more than a short time to tell that story. But I hope that'll be a good one.
Jim, if I can interrupt you for a second, we have one more after that on April 15th called Mapping Ocean Stories. And it's a collaboration between the First Coast, Maine Sea Grant, College of the Atlantic, and the Island Institute. The goal of Mapping Ocean Stories project is to find, collect, archive, and share oral histories from coastal communities around Maine. So that should be a good one too. That's on our website.
A little bit of you told me about that one. I got to get another book to read now.
I know. I don't know that it's a book, but it's going to be an interesting one.
You'll be busy reading. Well, if you want another book, look at this book here. This is a funny little book. It's not a very big one, but it's full of sea lore and old sea tales and things like that. It's my memoirs. 50 years ago, 45, 50 years of sailing, all these great big vessels. I own four of the biggest schooners on the coast here. And a good donation to the world famous Sail Power Steam Museum. You can get one of those books.
I want one, Jim. Thank you so much. I'm going to come get one. And it's
Yeah.
wonderful to meet you. I've heard so much about you over the years, but never had the chance to actually meet you. So this has been a pleasure.
Well, I hope you haven't heard too much and don't believe any of it anyway. And this book, is full of my memoirs, and some of that's even true. You can't tell, but be glad to sit you out with as many books as you'd like to have. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Uh, Flip on here, and I want to encourage you to come and see the Sail Power Steam Museum and check out our collection and get a boat and go sailing with us. It'd be just terrific. Anyway, donations are encouraged. We gratefully receive any donations and welcome you all. If there's no more discussion, anybody else have anything to say? Now's your chance to jump in. We thank you very much for coming and we thank you very much for your attendance. I'm Captain Jim Sharp, signing off.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Robin and Amy. Wonderful job.
Thank you, Nat.